Hello, I'm Austin Leduc, the Assistant Director of the Center for Safeguarding Minors and Vulnerable Adults at St. Paul University, Ottawa, Canada. Welcome to our podcast episode with Professor Bianca Briciu, Assistant Professor at the School of Leadership, Ecology, and Equity at St. Paul University. Her work focuses on leadership development through emotional and social intelligence, mindfulness, compassion, and systems thinking. Her research interests include emotional intelligence, transformative leadership, EDI issues, integral education, and spirituality. Professor Briciu is a certified emotional intelligence coach and author of The Revolutionary Art of Love, From Romantic Love to Global Compassion. She is currently involved in research into resilience in education and organizational transformation. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today, Professor Briciu, for our podcast to dive in further into generative dialogue and emotional intelligence. We're very happy that you're able to join us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. So we have a couple of questions to dive into, and our first question today is, could you explain what generative dialogue is?
Well, generative in its word means creative, but creative out of something that doesn't exist already, something completely new. And if you think about the differences between, let's say, a discussion or a debate, in a debate, there are different positions that people will defend and explain, and it's usually the best logical explanation that tends to win, so to speak. So there is a more competitive engagement with each other in that kind of dialogue. But in generative dialogue, people give up the need to be right. So there is a concern with the pursuit of what is unknown and trying to understand each other so that we could reach a deeper type of meaning that is hidden, so to speak. So it's a concept that has been used a lot by David Bohm, for example. And his idea that there is this river of meaning that surrounds all of us. And the deeper we go into dialogue, the more we can access its generative power.
It's very interesting. Yes, that's, yeah. So a little bit expanding upon that then, how can we allow for these conversations to move beyond just listening and to truly become generative dialogue?
Well, I think that one of the things that prevents a dialogue from moving into generative is that we don't really know how to listen. So when somebody speaks, we are already in our head trying to think of the best answer to that person. So there is that engagement in deep listening. And like I said before, giving up the need to be right. So being in that position of humility, which is hard to be in, right?
Sure.
To be in a humble position when you engage in dialogue, because that requires trust in other people, and that requires openness to the opinions of others. So when we can give up the need to be right, when we can listen deeply, when we don't think that we know the truth, but we are in this collective exploration, these are some of the conditions that will contribute to generative dialogue. And then, of course, we will need good methods, like a circle type of structure, like good questions, a sense of safety for participants. And this is what creates the conditions. So we need important conditions that are inner conditions, right? That those positions of humility and not knowing, and empathy for the opinions of others, and not being in that. We are so used to the debate type of being in which we try to prove ourselves, in which we explain ourselves.
Yeah, so a lot of truly listening and to not, like in a sense, not be competitive about different views or with our dialogue towards others. That's, very nice. So kind of diving onto a different foot here, looking at emotional intelligence, how does emotional intelligence help us to better understand and accompany individuals who have experienced trauma? I guess similar to what you were talking about generative dialogue, with that being with the accompaniment aspect there as well. Are you able to explain a little bit on that?
Thank you. That's a really good question, because if we think about the basic definition of emotions, like the sources of information that we have about how we interact with our environment. Emotions are usually types of information that we can also access regarding trauma. So for example, if our emotions are extremely intense and they are not really adequate to the context, so if we get extremely angry or extremely sad, even if there is no event around us to objectively, so to speak, but for us it is, that's already pointing a symptom of trauma and of triggering. And that's why triggers usually are certain events or situations that activate people emotionally, and then they react with these intense emotions. They either shut down or they are very, reactive in a sense. So emotional intelligence is very important to be able to understand one's own emotions and what they mean, because we feel a lot of things all the time. It's almost like it's something that runs at the background, like you have a computer and it runs its program in the background. You do other things, but it doesn't mean it's quiet. So emotions are constantly showing up, and when we pay attention to them and we understand them, we sometimes can even start tracking some of the sources of trauma, and they can become this thread that take us. It's almost like you walk in the forest and you have a path that takes you. So emotions are paths that take us towards the source of trauma, the types of reactions that we may have. And it's important when we accompany other people, because emotional intelligence helps us understand other people's emotions and our own. So we understand other people's emotions through empathy, but it's not only about cognitive understanding. We also need to be capable to feel with the other person so that they feel accompanied. And that's where emotional intelligence is very important. So first of all, understanding, and second of all, being able to trust that you can feel an emotion that may be difficult for you. Yeah.
And it seems as well that there's a level of vulnerability there also, which brings me into wondering, when working with people who feel unsafe, what role do safety, belonging, and dignity play in the healing process, especially when looking at emotional intelligence?
Stacey Haynes, who wrote a book called The Politics of Trauma, spoke about safety, belonging, and dignity as the basic human needs. And whenever these needs are violated or they are not allowed to manifest themselves, they are not well responded to, people experience trauma. So for example, when you mention safety, many people who have been traumatized feel unsafe. They feel unsafe in relationships because, they cannot trust other people. They may feel unsafe in different contexts. So when working with people who feel unsafe, first of all, we would need, I tend to speak about love as that need to be in a loving position, right, towards the other person, and to be patient, because people who feel unsafe, they do not open up as easily and may sometimes respond in ways that are not direct or open. So understanding that it's very important to create conditions of safety for people, and creating conditions of safety is about being patient with their reactions, being there for them, creating a context, for example, where there is privacy, showing that we genuinely care for them. And I think this is the basic ingredient. That's why I mentioned love, care, and that attitude of, I'm here for you, and I really want to help you, and I really want to understand you. Because sometimes if, for example, you start from a position of authority and I know what is good for you, that makes people feel unsafe. And in terms of belonging, many people who experience trauma, they feel that they don't belong with others. It's difficult for them to connect more deeply to others. And there too, for example, asking them questions about their personal needs, again, showing them that you are there for them, sharing a little bit about yourself, to the degree that's common sense in a way. And I think that part of belonging is that sense of the other person, that they are being seen and understood for who they are and not misunderstood. There is no desire to impose something on them or to belittle their experience or misunderstand. And dignity is one of the third. So if we talk about safety, belonging, and dignity is this sense that you are of intrinsic value. And trauma is usually or has made people feel that they don't have value and they don't have a sense of worth. So the way we can accompany people to restore that sense of dignity, it's very important to give them choice, to invite them to participate, to show them that they have value and that they matter, to know the details about their lives. So that's why, for example, in therapy, it's so important to remember what the patient told you and remember their names and their situation. So that, as part of restoring dignity, is making people feel that they are inherently valuable.
Yeah, and it really makes me think then of another kind of thought about the importance of presence and also posture in accompaniment. So could you explain a little bit more about that as well, with, as you had mentioned, about making sure that the person feels heard and seen?
In accompaniment, there are these three different, I would say, aspects that are important to be well integrated. One is posture, the role, and the relationship. And in terms of what do we mean by posture, it's this inner attitude and inner state that we show up with. So that's usually something that is mostly invisible, even in training. In training for specific types of accompaniment, there is a lot of focus on role and a little bit on relationship and a little bit less on the posture. So posture refers to that inner state of, how should I put it, generosity of spirit and of love and care and paying attention, being there for the other person, not having one's own personal agenda, not wanting to control, and cultivating an attitude of openness that allow people to be who they are without making them in a different image that we think that they are. So, for example, presence is one quality that is very important in posture, and presence refers to that ability to listen deeply and to leave the space to the other person. When we don't listen deeply, I think that we reduce the experience of the other, and we create a sort of wall or a sort of disengagement with them. So presence also means that we can pay attention. And I like this idea that attention is such a gift that we can bring to others. So I would say that attention and love are the two wings of a bird in the sense of a posture that has a quality of presence that is necessary for restoring these qualities of safety, belonging, and dignity.
Attention and love, yes, yeah, that's two very fundamental for it. Yeah, that is wonderful. And as an additional question then to that, and especially with accompanying and to have that understanding and love for others, what kind of relational or group conditions would help people shift from defensiveness, as that could very much arise, or fear, into openness, creativity, and trust, as you had mentioned a little bit before about trust?
Yeah, I think that there are a few conditions that are very important, and of course the creation of every group will be different, the same way that the relationship between one person and another is unique and tends to be different. But one of the fundamental aspects of helping people work through their fear and restoring a sense of trust is, first of all, the quality of presence of facilitators of a group. So again, facilitators being in an open state, being in a state of generosity, of attention, of care or love. Then there is I would say the aspect of the structure of the circle. So for example, the structure of the circle is about giving voice to every participant, not creating power differentials that make people feel afraid and maybe retreat from participating. What I've seen that also works very well is to in terms of structure, for example, to ask questions that relate to people's desires, their needs, their values, because that already creates a sense of ease with each other when we speak about really important things, not necessarily vulnerable. And so we don't start with inviting people to speak about their history of trauma, but we invite people gently into, it's almost like a gradual immersion in water as you go swimming. So you start with smaller or less deep steps, and then you can go deeper. So for example, if you have a large circle, inviting people into conversations in dyads or smaller circle, like 3 or 4 people, because it's usually there that you create more openness, and then you can bring people back in the space. Maybe another important aspect of helping people work through their fear in a circle is to, I would say, be vulnerable and to model vulnerability and authenticity, right? So authenticity is very important, and these are things that usually people feel. You cannot force them. So again, it's about that posture, that quality of presence, and we will see that the more people start being vulnerable, the deeper that vulnerability gets. Because if you see that somebody is already starting to be vulnerable, you yourself dare to be more vulnerable. So again, it's about that gradual process of openness through quality of presence, the circle structure. Oh, and one important thing is to add some methods for relaxing people or bringing them into a state of calm, for example, through a few breaths at the beginning, or music, or let's say an image, or any kind of art form that would allow them to shake away a little bit that tension that comes when you are in the presence of others, and to move into more openness and calm.
That is great, yes. Well, thank you so very much for taking the time to talk with us about the emotional intelligence as well as generative dialogue. I'm sure that those listening to the podcast today will greatly benefit from the tools that you've explained to help with accompaniment and working with dialogue. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.